Welcome back to What Have You. I'm Rachel Jankovic.
I'm Becca Merkel.
And, drum roll,
I'm in the back seat. I'm Nate.
it's our brother.
I've invited myself onto What Have You.
Yes, it's good he did. This is the, really
It's a bit
we
of
should,
a carjacking, actually.
to throw
I know,
back
he's-
to childhood, all three of us should have been in the back seat
I
instead
know,
of,
but Nate's kind of stuck in front of, actually, not behind, a bunch of skis.
the
from
ends of skis
my
are
daughter's-
stabbing his neck.
my daughter's ski trip over the weekend.
The skis and I are in the back seat.
So,
Never mind.
Nate's getting other phone
Excuse me.
calls. He's just, he
And-
came on our show, but he didn't mute his phone. He didn't he knew we were so
Should I take
polished.
the call?
Yeah, for sure. So the reason that we are having Nate on the show, we could have come up with all kinds of reasons
Yeah.
to have him
right.
on the show. I feel like now we need to introduce you, and that's very difficult to do as a sister. Our brother is an author.
We've had him on before.
Yeah,
I
I've been on
know,
here
but
before.
we can't. It's been quite a while, couple
was
of
from my
years.
brain tumor.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
it
So
was.
I'm feeling like what you should know
Have
is
we
that
been doing this that long?
yes, somebody sent me one time a question about who is this author Andy Wilson, or Andy, like they were googling trying to find it, and they realized we'd said Andy as though it was Andy. But this is our brother Nate. He has a lot of kids, young adult books. Is that what they are?
They're
Technically?
middle grade, technically.
Middle grade. They're great books. My kids, I think, will probably own like 50 different copies of all of your books because I buy them
Probably.
every time I see them anywhere else.
And because they get left outside in the mud.
that does happen sometimes.
We've got some pretty tattered copies.
we
But
got that.
you know what? I saved one page, fell out, and you had given my kids an advance.
Yeah, ours fell apart on that one too.
Well, not the spiral one. It was an advance
Yeah.
copy, but you wrote in it because we were driving to Holland from England, and you wrote something about to make the drive to Holland more fun. Anyway, and that page is loose in the world, so I have it saved just as a one-page piece that is sort of...
All right, so Nate is a man of many endeavors, a man with a lot of interests in life, and the reason that we're having him here is one of his is it more recent? Riot and the Dance.
Yeah, well,
it's the nature documentary.
It's actually upcoming. It's not even more recent.
Well, but the original one already happened.
Yeah, so Riot and the Dance 1 came out a while ago, and Riot and the Dance Water, the follow-up, is coming up in March, and it is the most recent of our motion picture shows, and we are very excited to push it to Christian families. So I invited myself here today to talk about Riot and the Dance 2, nature, critters, being outside, and our own Uncle Gordon, the Uncle Gordon that we all share.
The feature, the lead, in these, the tour guide is our Uncle Gordon.
Yep.
Who...
Dr. G, according to many around
Really?
the world now.
Really?
Yep, and he is, when
funny.
we grew up, he was the guy who would take us out chasing snakes and frogs and turtles and everything else. He was the curator of natural revelation. Whereas our family was very much a family of books, and it was very much a library and the written word, and it was all a blast and lots of fun. Uncle Gordon being Dad's little brother. He was the one who got us outside and playing with snakes and
Well, you know what I remember?
and created that outdoor imagination.
He would, because my kindergarten teacher was the woman he eventually married, but they weren't married yet. And she was my kindergarten teacher, and I remember Uncle Gordon would come in and show us snakes. So he would bring snakes in, or he would lend them to the class so we could have one in the class. And inevitably, they would always get loose. And there would be announcements about there's a snake loose in the building.
always
and
a
then
lost
they would
snake.
always end up found dead in the sanctuary, which is
or at
kind
least
of
once, which became always in your
no.
imagination.
It was a thing. It was like it was symbolic. They would go into
They
the
were like the
sanctuary
flies
and
getting stuck.
they would die of the sheer holiness.
Well,
Yes.
we
I had Aunt Meredith was my kindergarten teacher as well. So in bringing the whole thing weirdly full circle, the woman who taught me to read was Aunt Meredith, who ended up marrying Uncle Gordon, who was Mr. Snake in his own way.
So I remember, because of Uncle Gordon, I remember as a little kid I did not have any fear of snakes or anything. I developed that later in life. I'm not afraid of them, but the fact that I can remember holding his rubber boas and having it like go up your shirt sleeve and down, like I was a little kid with a snake. Like I remember standing there with a snake trolling down your back to come out the other side of your shirt and having that not stressing me out. But when I think about that now, I think I would not be nearly as cool about that as my child self was.
Luckily, the Right in the Dance is not just about having snakes down your shirt.
No, but it's, praise the Lord. There's something else.
But one of the reasons why I really wanted to make these movies is because that experience with Uncle Gordon that we had was so formative and important and essential in the way we view the world as God's creation, the way we relate to it, the way we relate to all of it, from the little bugs to the big creatures to the weather. We really wanted to give that to as many other kids as possible. Right. Making Dr. G everybody's Uncle Gordon is kind of a high goal of mine. But also we just have so many Christian families who are terrified of the sciences. And for a kid to love the natural world is immediately scary because it's so dominated by the priesthood of unbelief. Sort of
a pagan interest. Like if you are interested in this, and you're getting into the bad shoot down to
So if somebody loves dinosaurs, for example, we all know to immediately be like, uh-oh, here we go. Here come all the evil lies. Yeah. And if we go anywhere, and if people love hummingbirds, critters, they love creatures, they want to get in the sciences, it doesn't matter that God made them all. It doesn't matter that God loves them all and that he's revealing his personality. They've been tainted by the
pompous priests that tell us where they came from and what they're for.
And so you can't turn on a BBC documentary and marvel at these beautiful things they filmed without sitting there listening to straight up blasphemy.
You have to be there with your kids to be like, see how that's dumb. Or no, with our kids now,
whales did not actually come from cows.
Yeah, they did not.
Contrary to popular opinion, cows did not walk back into the water and say, let's become rhinormous and not have legs and learn to sing.
It's funny
and spout water out of our backs.
I was gonna say,
do people?
Oh yeah, that's the official word.
What? Why did they walk back in the water?
Well, because they're mammals,
they
right?
were land-born.
They were
land-born, but then they went back.
So the theory goes that everything that's a mammal in the water had to have left the water as a fish, evolved into creatures on the land,
and then become
a mammal, become a lactating mammal.
Yeah.
With placental birth
from a fish.
Yeah, placental birth, lactation, all that stuff. And then said, you know what? I want a ton of shrimp. I just love the shrimps. And so
let's figure out how to breathe underwater.
So but the narrative, the point is, you can't, if a kid loves spinner dolphins or sharks, or they love to see that stuff, and they should because God made it all.
That's a good impulse.
That's a great thing to want to look at God's handiwork. God tells us to. The book of Job tells us to. Our assignment as all the Psalms. Genesis, the whole point.
Just consider the work of your hands. Like, look at all of this.
And yet, when when our kids are going to do that, they are going to encounter more lies than they will in almost any other area. It's like we've let atheists do all of our Bible translation.
Yeah.
Like, we have special revelation, then we have natural revelation, and we've just said, hey, could you guys handle all the natural revelation for us? That would be great. Let us know how your exegesis pans out. I should say
that as a mother, I do not, I am not afraid of my kids being interested in science things. But we don't, for instance, I would not just purchase a book on dinosaurs for the little kids, because you're like, so there's a well-established thing in our house that is like, if there's something super stupid in this book, you could tell me about it. We'll talk about it, because there's just like so much weird nonsense. Or what was that hilarious time that you had with Rory in what museum was it where Rory was getting the giggles in a very serious time?
The Natural History Museum in New York City, and I had taken him with me, and he was on a trip out there, and he was 10, and we were walking through looking at all these amazing fossils of these amazing creatures, these giant skeletons. And there was this one slab of fossil that was this tangled mat of skeletons from hundreds and hundreds of animals in one block. And there was a plaque under it that said, basically, the only way we can explain this is that once there was a watering hole. And over centuries of drought, animals came to this historically known watering hole, and they lay down on top of each other and died of thirst. And then there was a
watering hole?
It's because of how many.
Yeah, but it was known to be one. And then it dried up in the drought, and they kept going there and dying.
Oh,
anyway.
They kept telling their children.
Their family legend was, if you go there, then there will be water. But then by the time they get there, they die of thirst on top of one another.
So they kept dying of thirst on top of each other.
Okay.
Like just sort of self-tetrising.
Yes, exactly.
Into like.
And then finally there was the drought ended, and there was a giant, highly localized flood.
But giant,
a really big local one. And it suddenly just swept up these many, many hundreds of creatures that had died on top of each other and pressed them into the mud and fossilized it all into one little, segment that could show up in a museum in New York. And Rory read this plaque, and he became ill with humor. I mean, he laughed himself silly. And we're in these hallowed marble hallways, and he was having himself.
He's like, I'm the kid from Idaho, and I feel fine saying this is the dumbest plaque I ever read in all my born days.
And he got himself, he was sniffing and wheezing and crying and laughing his head off at the sheer likelihood of this explanation. And we were catching many a glance, many in a scant look, because this particular area of the museum was very, very solemn and very, very quiet. It was like a library.
It was the Holy of Holies, so some incense burning.
And so he was the ill-behaved child who would not stop laughing. And we kept going through the rest of the museum, and he kept getting re-tickled, thinking back and having himself another laugh. And we had to go back through. He wanted to see it again before we left.
I actually have to say, though, that I think that this brings up something that is two things. One is that thinking that what the world is doing in their origin stories is actually worth just laughing at. Yes, it's shameful and it's disregarding God's word, but more than that, it's just incredibly lame. It is what you have come up with here does not hold together.
I just think as a creation myth, it's not even a good one.
No.
Mm-mm. But the thing is there
have been many better ones.
The
Norse and the Apache, I think both did better.
But I remember years and years ago, and I don't know if this was a serious desire that you had, or if it was just you, saying, wouldn't it be funny if, I remember you saying it would be great if there were Christian museums of natural history where the atheist kids weren't allowed to go because of the plaques, or if you know what I mean? Where it's
that's something I still want to do.
If the
teachers, it's kind of right in the dance. But the sort of thing
if the teachers taking their classes through the museum had to say, "Now this isn't true, children. We don't believe this."
The first time when we were filming Right in the Dance 1, I had a woman, an official employee of the state of Arizona, interrupted a shot, walked in between the camera and Gordon to interrupt us to say that we were incorrect. We're not allowed to say that. That's wrong, because he referred to javelina as pigs, and they're little piggies. These are little piggies, and yes, they're New World pigs. They're not old world pigs, but they got little piggy noses and little piggy feet, and they snort, and they're not what we think of when we think of pigs. But she was interrupting us, just being there as a park ranger, was stepping in front of the camera, refusing to let us get the shot. No, you may not. That is blasphemy to refer to these as pigs. And she said, horses are closer to cows than these javelina.
Apparently.
Than these javelina are to pigs. Except for the piggy noses and the piggy feet and the whole piggy demeanor.
Except for the.
And it's no, I'm not saying that they were an offshoot. I'm just saying they got piggy noses, so we're going to call them pigs. Because we're naming them. We have the right to name these things. We can do that without saying that they descended from one another. But anyway, the whole point of Riot in the Dance is to get around the world and film these creatures and do it in a way that honors and glorifies God. And it's amazingly striking.
And that's not sour-faced arguing with with people who believe in evolution. It's actually just pretending that that's not even there, and we're just looking at the beauty of the world.
It's not a debate. These are not debate movies. These are movies that are designed to feed and reinforce faith. And they're designed to celebrate God's natural revelation, his creation, and to glorify him through it. And we're not even bothering with the, now children, modern scientists would tell you. We're not even doing that. We're getting right into the celebration of God's work.
Who gives a rip what the modern scientists would tell you at this time?
Well, a lot of people kind of need to. But
now, we will say, admittedly, we will say things like, scientists told us that sharks will submit to us in the water if they think we're bigger, meaner sharks. And that's their theory, because eye contact, there's a whole section of the film where we learn that if you make aggressive eye contact with sharks in the water, they respond weirdly, submissively to it. It turns out that's true. I've experienced it. It's nuts. But they were telling us it's because we seem to be bigger, meaner, dominant sharks. They're not that stupid. When you look at the footage, we're these flailing, pale, very tasty-looking objects. And Genesis 9, the dread of man, explains it far more than any kind of mistake that they might think I'm a killer whale. Or they might think maybe they think I'm a tiger shark as I flail helplessly up here above them on the surface of the water. We're talking about these fish with electroreceptors where they can perceive a disturbance in the water miles away. Really? And they can tell what it is. They know what kind of fish it is.
Oh, no. Really?
And, then we watch a leaf.
It's a little too knowledgeable for my taste.
So then you have a leaf lands on the surface of the water when we were with them, and every shark went over and checked it out. They all became aware that something had landed over there, and it was a leaf. And all of them went over and looked at it and left. And here I am spazzing out with fins and a snorkel, and I think that maybe I'm seeming as sleek and torpedo-like as one of these things.
Somehow you didn't think you were bringing that kind of shock and awe to the shark world.
Looking back at the footage afterwards, I thought, we didn't fool anybody. Genesis 9 was the only explanation. But it is, I wanted to come on here and invite myself on here because we want to kind of spread the word about these group showings we're doing. We want to make the movie. We've made the movie available to churches and schools and homeschool co-ops for showings from March 6th to May 5th. People can sign up for group showings. They can do it as fundraisers. You can sell tickets and keep all the money to raise money for something, anything, or you can make it non-profit and it's just an outreach event.
Do you keep the movie too? How does that work?
Well, what we do is if a group signs up, a church, a school, classical conversations community or a co-op, when they sign up, they get a bunch of stuff, coloring books for kids and things like that.
Okay.
Plus a display copy of, a display copy of the movie.
Okay.
And it's a public display copy. So it's not one of those movies that's got an FBI warning in the front. It's a movie that says you may show this to as many people as you want for as much money as you want.
Okay.
For 2 months. That's it. And then afterwards you can keep the disc. It's just a personal copy.
Got it.
But so that's what we're pushing, and we want to make sure that schools and co-ops and churches all get the word, that they actually all hear about it. When the first movie came out, we were in 1,100 theaters, and afterwards, the biggest thing I heard from people was we loved it, and right behind it, almost tied, was we couldn't see it, it didn't come to us.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that this movie can go wherever people want.
This is a new approach.
Yeah, we're trying something completely new.
What about...
This movie can be on any screen near you that you want it to be on.
How about overseas?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The disc is territory free. We've already got people doing it in Australia and England and other places.
It's so fun.
Although we should just say as a side note to foreign listeners, foreign meaning English.
Sure.
Spazzing out is not rude. Here.
I think we learned that one time.
Actually, it is, and I meant it that way.
No!
He did not mean that.
Not really.
Sometimes these things happen.
But so they can get a copy of the
so
disc.
if you go to riotinthedance.com, there's a family pay-per-view option, but what we're really trying to push is these group showings.
I think that's going to be fun. I need to get my head around the details, but I think it'd be fun to host a showing and do a party along.
Oh yeah,
like great. Host a showing. Maybe we need What Have You listeners to contribute their own hospitality plans for doing a showing. What are you gonna do? What is that underwater blue jello scene? Well, I've done that in my life before with little sharks embedded in blue Jello in Solo cups. I mean, there's a lot of things I'd rather eat. So but I think some of the younger customers...
I guarantee you there's people who are going to be doing showings in swimming pools with people in floaties watching the whole movie.
Oh, my word. Yeah, that's a good idea. If only I had a swimming pool.
It's $195 for a group showing thing, which means like we're trying to push it to churches and schools where that's an easy cost to defray.
Right.
Across tickets or across families chipping in.
Basically, the goal is just taking our kids to the theater is like $1 million. So basically,
and that's actually when we did the last one. Theaters kept 75% of the ticket price. It's just craziness. So we want to make more, and we want to keep doing this. But more importantly, we actually want the ones we have made
to get out there,
get everywhere, to get to the people who want them.
So, what was your favorite part of making that movie? Like, is it Sharks? Was that the highlight?
Sharks was pretty cool. I really liked the humpback whales. Manatees kind of blew my mind. They're just funny. Just seeing the personality of creatures. The creatures have really clear personalities. Anybody who's ever had a pet knows that. Mm-hmm. But when you see it in the wild, it's weird.
And you think how funny it is that God knows them all so well, and He knows.
For just even anemones, like these little gelatinous things that are not plants. It's like these are animals. As is coral. Coral is also animalian.
Yeah.
It's not a fungus. It's not a plant. It's just this weird thing that God's done under there. But anemones have personalities.
What was it?
And they can test that. Like the anemones will fight each other for territory, and the biggest one does not always win. And that's like the way they know. Some of them are chicken. Some of them are little courageous anemones that battle off bigger ones for their piece of rock. And they're basically jelly. They don't even have brains. They've got like these little ganglion things that can fire off.
Do you remember, I'm feeling the need to say this, that in our childhood, I would say it was our early teen years, but I might be wrong. The three of us are we're each 2 years apart.
Yeah.
4 year spread. But the time when we first encountered the Battle of the Ants, and we spent a shocking amount of time trying to evaluate what are they fighting over.
I still do this.
It's still fascinating. But we found an ant battle on the crack of a sidewalk.
They're always on the crack.
Waging roar in the crack of a sidewalk.
I think cracks matter deeply to ants because they're always over a
like
crack
what is
in
it?
a sidewalk.
Do you think it's like the Panama Canal? Like this is a really important place that we need to fight about.
But there's a spot in my garden that they fight over, but it's the edges of the brick. So it's
think
like
about
it's
how
a big
dangerous
deal.
it is for an ant to cross a sidewalk.
Yeah, maybe the cracks are important.
Crossing a sidewalk for an ant it's
deadly.
That's
deadly.
Right there.
Well, see, I just remember us being very entertained by, like, you get up close. And I also remember when we went together in the micro theater to Microcosmos.
Yeah.
And that was a great film in a lot of ways because that one had no talking. It just did
just bugs.
It was just bugs. Did they not talk? I remember
there was operatic
opening
stuff.
The opening was a song of "Open Your Eyes Before You Die."
Yep.
But we loved that together, and we got really involved in like the hard times the dung beetle was having when he kept losing it. I guess what I was going to say is...
We watched a lot of nature documentaries. And all of them, we could sit there and watch the animals and love what they were doing and relate to them. And then somebody would come on and explain an exact untruth about the whole situation. I mean, when I met my wife in 2000, in the year 2000, when I first met Heather, and she was asking me what I wanted to do, and it was like, well, I didn't have anything I wanted to be. I just had lots of things I wanted to do, and one of them on the list then was I want to make nature documentaries.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I want to get from nature documentaries to museums, zoos, like down the line.
I remember that.
Where you have,
you remember him wanting a reptile house.
Oh yeah, totally.
This is our brother. This is our brother who has a few head of cattle, of tortoises at his house, And it has to treat them like cattle because they're having to graze in different areas and be.
They have their own wee barn at the moment.
Yeah, I know the tortoise barn that gets put up in Nate's house, but the long-term plan is like a reptile house.
Yep.
And I actually, what you were saying about the personality of animals, when we went to the Boise Zoo when we were there for state track meet, the animal that most took my breath away of all of them was and I'm going to say it wrong, the capybaras. Is that how you say it?
Oh, yeah.
They were so...
The giant rodents.
So ludicrous and hilarious. And so... Are they from Brazil? Why did I think that was like an Australian thing?
No, they get eaten by anaconda. They're like the favorite anaconda snack.
Oh dear.
But they're unattractive as all get out, but very funny. But like they were kind of. It's not that they're ugly. It was ugly that one of their main features is that they go to the bathroom in their water. Like that, it was like, here's one of the big things we know about the capybaras.
Oh no!
But otherwise, they're just these
true
big,
rodents.
fat. Yeah. It looked like a guinea pig gone wild.
Well,
like
it is. That's exactly what it is.
Well, yeah, but
giant,
like the lady at the Arizona State Park. I'm careful with my categories, but it just looked like an enormous guinea pig.
Don't call a guinea pig a pig, please. They're not.
Yeah, well,
they're not pigs.
Guinea piglets.
Oh, guinea piglets, guinea piggies. The capybaras are. It's kind of funny to me when you look around the world and you see the way God balances things out, because in the southeastern U.S. and the southwestern U.S., all these different snakes that eat rodents. They primarily eat rodents, some that eat lizards. You go down to South America where you have a ginormous snake, and guess what he gives them? A ginormous rodent. So the only place in the world
Let's do this same thing on a larger scale.
Yeah, I'm going to take this, the equivalent of
our little garter snakes with little baby mice. And
we're going to have a garter snake scarfing baby mice in the wheat fields of Idaho. We're going to go down to South America, and I'm going to give you a rodent that's as heavy as some cows.
An ROUS.
But don't worry, I will match it with
an enormous snake.
Something that badly wants to swallow it whole and can.
It's so amazing.
It is really bizarre. I think in the filming, one of the things I loved the most is going to be, I think, kind of wildly popular among children and a little nerve-wracking for mothers in particular, is the water beetle, which in God's amusement and the way he designs everything, frogs eat thousands and thousands and thousands of insects. That's how they get by. They scarf all the insects. And then there's one insect that eats frogs.
No.
And when you have an insect that eats frogs,
you're dealing with an insect that people don't want to think about.
Yeah. And it's pretty neat looking, and it's amazing, and it has these rodeos where it gets on this frog. It grabs a frog, but it's not big enough to eat a frog truly. Instead, it drinks it. No. And so a frog, think of a frog as like a juice box.
Nappy.
A frog is a Capri Sun. And these are creatures that are just in every old pond. There's an insect that does this, that will eat frogs. And meanwhile, every frog...
Is it bigger than a frog?
It can be, yeah. But it doesn't need to be.
Yeah.
So it's the equivalent. It can eat something, I think, up to 50 times its size.
Oh, no.
So... And it's just down there doing work, just doing the thing. It doesn't know about the rest of the world. It's just in a murky little cow pond where God put it. And as far as it knows, it's supposed to hang on to a blade of grass and wait for a frog to swim by. At which point, it should drink it.
Oh,
and that's
don't they like inject it with something that dissolves the inside of the frog?
Yeah, so it's like a spider, but it shoots them up with an anesthetic that kind of just puts them into shock and then liquefies them, and then they slurp it out and throw off the skin like it's a Capri Sun baggie.
Oh.
So it's remarkable. And the thing is, like, as we've screened it, it's like the single most popular thing with kids. And they're just like, what? This is wild and exciting. And with moms, it's like, are we sure this is appropriate? This
seems bad.
Take it up with God.
Yeah.
Because, that's
the way it works. There's actually quite a bit in the natural world that in the flesh you can be tempted. I think you make this point, and where do you make this point, Nate? Is this in Right in the Dance, the first one? About how many kinds of spiders there are or whatever, that like to be a Christian who just won't abide by the reality that God made spiders is like, so as a mother, I actually talk
about it a lot at homeschooling conventions. and it's in Tilt-A-Whirl, and it shows up in Riot 1, where we as Christians, we are supposed to be trying to be more like God.
Right.
And we all know that. Like, we can all say that. Mm-hmm. But then God says, I love spiders.
And we say, can't go with you there.
We say, no. No. I will not even look at one. I will not. Take it away. Take it away from me, God.
How do you know? You have to know, do you think that God... I
will say he does not necessarily love them in your bathroom or in your shower.
Yeah, but don't you think that God might also delight in shocking his children with things? Because you think, like, do you remember 100% Choppa's story of walking in the rainforest in Africa? I remember, this is a story I remember hearing as a child, so I should probably ask him to tell it to me again, because it's been 30 years since I heard it. But that he rounded the corner and stuck his face in the abdomen of one of those bird-eating spiders that are so big, and that his story was that he leapt back and then hacked the entire thing to smithereens with a machete, like in a total frantic panic of what have I stuck my face in right now.
Well, the thing is, God tells us a lot with his design. So there's a lot of objectivity built into aesthetics. And when you see a spider,
they're meant to be.
And it's meant, like, the way it's designed and the way it's structured and the way it feeds and the way it builds its webs. All of that is telling us something about what God wants it to be like. We're not supposed to look at that and think we're looking at a bunny rabbit.
Yeah.
We're looking at two different things. We're supposed to react to them differently. But we have to be willing to marvel.
Yeah.
Because just as easily in Job, God could have said, did you teach the spider to spin?
Yeah.
Like, did you... the ability to spin silk, the strongest organic material on the planet... out of its rear end, and then to slurp it back in again. It's like, what is this nonsense?
They do?
Oh no, yeah, they've got all these little spinners. It's a whole thing. It's like it's not their rear end the way we think of rear ends. There's a whole loom going on, and it's bizarre. And the way they can pull it back and use it and reuse it.
I didn't know that part.
And that you have webs across rivers that are 60 feet wide. They're catching things. It's like God wants the bug population controlled, and he came up with something fantastic. And we should be able to appreciate it, but to appreciate it the way he wants us to. And there's so many moms of kids who are they can be suspicious of the evolutionary dogma that's everywhere, and they should be, but they also just have decided to say, I don't like what God's done.
Right.
And they just openly say that about anything. Yeah. Spiders, they feel free to say, oh, I hate those. Like,
well,
really?
I feel comfortable. I feel comfortable not loving a spider, but I also
you should love a spider in its place.
I am cautious in the way I would speak about it. One time we had a big spider in our front yard. I do not indulge my fear of things like that, and since having kids, I had to be much more aware of not wanting to pass on, like, if I dislike it, I don't want to make my children afraid of things because I don't care for it, or like if I'm like, I'm not going to pass on my feelings here. But we got home from somewhere, and this is rare here because Idaho doesn't have a lot of, we have spiders, but we don't have real big, we're not the land of scorpions and stuff. We were driving down the street, and as we started to turn into our driveway, Luke was like, what is that? You could see walking on our driveway like something that was bigger than it ought to have been. And we pulled in and got out, and it was, as we found out later, what's called a California trapdoor spider. Yeah. I've lived here my whole life, and I'd never seen one. So they're
otherwise known as Sasquatch spider.
Yeah, it was like a little tarantula. Yeah. Very like a tarantula, but not quite as big. But it was much bigger than I felt comfortable about looking at. And we caught the thing for the kids. But then in my efforts to be a naturalist to help them figure out what kind of thing this was and what the heck was going on, I spent too much time looking at it. And then I got myself into such a heebie-jeebie, like the hairy legs of that thing. It was so, I kept looking at it, and then Luke threw it back out into the front yard. We did not kill it. And he was like, well, I'm not going to kill the thing just for being ugly, because he was like, it wasn't in our house. It wasn't encroaching. Yeah. And apparently it's probably one of the kinds that kill other spiders, you know, but it took me some time to stroll through our front yard without feeling like that was with me.
We're sitting in a car outside your house looking at the plowed field, and the snow's all melted, so there's all the stubble. And the sun is, way in the south, so it's got a little bit of a horizontal light.
Yeah.
And what you're going to see in the spring is you're going to see the entire fields go spider silk.
Yeah.
And when the sun gets low, between every piece of stubble, as far as you can see, it'll be silk. And it will glisten, and it's amazing. And when you try to get a sense of, like, we have millions of acres of these fields here.
Yeah.
And every square inch of it is going to have a spider.
So much life.
And they're little, and they're just working. They're just doing work, and they're doing work in their corner of the universe, which is as big as they think the whole thing is.
Yeah.
This is where they're supposed to be. And so we what we've done.
It's kind of Puritan-like to look at everything and see in it, like to connect almost anything to who God is, and the beauty of God's design, and like this idea that there's a little creature doing exactly what it was meant to do, to glorify God.
Yep. And when you get a tank of air on your back, because for Right in the Dance 2, the whole crew had to get scuba certified, and it took us 3 years to make this movie. And you think every little square inch of this field in front of us, for miles, has got little spiders in it waiting to hatch out in the spring and do what they're supposed to do. When you put a mask on and you go underwater and you drop down where until very recently people could never go and they could never see, and you get to these very inhospitable little corners and you find the exact same stuff happening.
Yeah.
You find creatures everywhere doing work, hilarious creatures, funny, comical, busy little blue-eyed crabs, wolf eels, which are incidentally some of the niftiest things we have in the movie.
What is it?
A wolf eel looks
I don't know what that is.
It looks like, most people don't, fat-faced, enormously fat-faced. They look like the most crotchety old men you've ever seen.
Are they like the blobfish?
No, they have long bodies.
The blobfish is like the great joke of the deep.
Yes. So the wolf eels are super cartoony. Like, they have absolute cartoon faces, long bodies. They mate for life. Like, there's two of them.
There's little love stories with the wolf eels.
And so you meet these wolf eels, and there's a little old lady and a little old man.
How did you two meet?
Yeah. And they're down.
Was it love at first sight?
And they find a crack.
It was an arranged marriage.
They will, yeah.
In the wolf eel world, we don't get to marry for love.
And they will go down where it's dark. And they will go down where it's dark, and they'll find a crack.
That could be your next challenge.
And they will hang out there for the rest of their lives.
Why don't you do your next challenge could be
unless an octopus
Pride and
runs them out.
A Pride and Prejudice in wolf eels.
They will, and really, it's amazing. So they will. We don't really even know how many offspring they have, but they can be hanging out up to 700 feet down in a crack where they just leave to get food. They take turns. One of them guards the eggs at all times. The other one goes out and gets food and brings it back, and they rotate. And they live for 25 years. And they're fish. They're not actual eels, but they look like, they're long-bodied, so they look like eels. And they look like, grumpy old men. They have the funniest look. And you get down there and you realize that only God has been amused by this.
Yeah.
For
nobody
thousands
else.
And thousands of years, this was just between the wolf eels and God. And you go down, you find the crabs, and you look at the weird jellyfishes, and you look at all the tube anemones throwing shoulders at each other over rocks.
I remember seeing I feel like it was a Blue Planet, or what's the one that's the winter one? What was it? There's one that was all ice and polar bears are in it.
Yeah.
That's sad.
The super sad ones.
That was the one that made me really feel like it's so true that all of creation is groaning.
Yep.
Like that this is. But there was a little worm in that. I'm probably retelling this all wrong, but all the poor thing's trying to get done is turn into a butterfly. It's just or a moth of some kind. It's just trying to eat enough to make a cocoon to turn into a moth. But because of the difficult situations that it finds itself in, it keeps getting frozen solid.
Yep.
So what happens is that spring springs
decades
there,
pass,
and it blasts out and starts frantically eating, trying to get ready to turn into a moth, and then it gets frozen solid again. And then next spring it comes blasting out to try again. And it's like after something like 7 years, it finally has eaten enough. And so then it thaws back out, freaks out and makes a cocoon, freezes solid, and then the next year, and then it comes out as a moth that lives for like 3 days.
Yeah.
It finally is like, we did it,
and then it dies, and God says, "Well done."
God's like,
well
"Good
done.
job, seeing it through. Did the thing you were supposed to do." And you just have to look at it and be like, it's the same thing. Nobody saw that for forever, and then when they figure out what this poor creature has been going through all this time, and you think like, wow, God is more interesting than
interesting. I mean, more fun,
more beautiful, more like everything is way beyond our capacity too.
So I love the humpbacks that we filmed for this, because they are so silly and so enormous, and you're talking about something that's the size of 3 school buses.
Really?
And, yeah, and then it just imagine the water resistance trying to move 3 school buses through
casually through the water,
trying to accelerate, and then it decides to jump and launch its entire body out of the water. It's got to swim hard enough and strong enough to leap all that body out, and the calculations on the amount of energy and calorie burn it takes to do it, it's silly. It's so silly, and they're eating so that they don't have to eat for half the year or so. So, like, wasting, like, if we're just talking about survival, it's an enormous waste. And so there's always these big conversations between scientists.
It must be something practical.
About, exactly, what is it about jumping out of the water and landing with the force of a bomb and the impact of a bomb?
I think it's that God wanted them to.
Yeah, and then the concept of it's fun. They clearly enjoy it. They obviously enjoy it. I think the closest practical explanation is that it gets itchy barnacles off. I'm like, I can see God making the whales itch enough that they have to like launch themselves.
One time,
and then they sing unique songs. And humpback whales, the males will sing, and the males will like accompany a female and a calf from like Hawaii to Alaska. And they will sing the entire way. And they'll sing like a 15-minute song.
99 bottles of beer
on a loop. A 15-minute song on a loop. And it's as loud as a jet engine. And you can hear it from miles through the water. And they just accompany them with this song.
Professional.
Wow. I don't know how appreciated it is, but it's...
Well, one time when we were down at the Snake River at that Kelly Bar where we would love to go, but one time when we were there, the carp were jumping.
Oh, yeah.
And I had never really put my mind to the carp and what they were about. So, like, I think it kind of came as a surprise to me that there were carp in the Snake River. Like, I was like, huh? Like, what are these big tanks of a thing? But then they were just being a surprise because there were so many of them. They were just slapping on the water. And I did look it up, and it turns out that the reason carp jump is to help get rid of some gas problems that they're having, which I thought is exactly the kind of coarse jest that you're like, it's a big ugly fish that's basically not even edible. Like, it's only edible if you're having a life crisis. Like,
you're a dying bear.
Only if there's the only thing that eats this, and it is just pretty tasteless in all the ways.
And then you think about how loud that slap is. It's a loud slap. And then have something the size of multiple school buses do it.
Oh my word!
And it
shocking.
Is rockingly enormous. It is like quite literally the impact of a bomb.
So did you guys get footage of whales underwater?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I'm excited about
humpbacks underwater, calf, the leaping. But the thing is, the way we produce these things is that we go places and we say a prayer. Because we don't have the budget to go do what the BBC does and spend tons and tons and tons of money.
14 years filming them off.
Also, staging things.
That's what I was going to say.
They wildly stage things. This is the dirty secret of planet Earth and all that stuff.
Yeah.
We're dealing with tranquilized animals, radio tagged animals, radio tracked animals. Like,
really?
Oh, yeah. They'll things will get tranquilized.
Well, the one I remember, there was a preview, and it was a cool preview for one of those shows, but it was the little lizard that's trying to outrun the snakes.
Yeah.
But the thing that didn't work about that is the whole preview. Like, it was quite cool, but you're like, you just switched camera angles.
Where's the camera guy?
The camera wasn't there a second ago, so. Actually, this is multiple runs.
And you're being 5th grade boys about it, where you're feeding lizards to snakes and you're filming the chase.
That's not good.
But the thing is, we just don't have, we go places and we know what we want to get, but we went to the Monterey Bay and it's like the time wasn't perfect because most of the humpbacks were in Mexico by that time of the year.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, we've got 2 days here. God, bring us whatever you want us to get.
Yeah.
So whatever you want us to show people, bring it along, and it's so fun.
And he delivered. He delivered.
Through 2 movies now. Through 2 movies now, we can show up on very tight timelines with tight budgets, and the stuff shows up. Leopards in Sri Lanka, just
so fun.
Why the wild things we've seen, the crazy things we've seen that were not radio tracked.
Right.
We didn't get in helicopters and go exactly to the GPS coordinates and set up for it. We just had to go see if a buffalo was going to come by. Go see if we could find cobras. Go see if we could find these things. And the whales, they did their deeds. The whales showed up. They showed up great for us. The sharks were amazing. The manatees, we tried to film in Belize, and they were not behaving. They were not willing to do it. And then our guide told us that they taste like bacon. And we thought, this might be why the manatees are not so friendly. So
because down here they hunted for bacon.
Down here they get et. So we went to Florida, where there's some freshwater springs that are super warm year round. Some people say in part because of nuclear reactors, and so there's some nice, really, really clear, warm water that the manatees love. And in that water, the manatees are like,
where they are not a bacon substance.
Where where nobody's looking to eat them. They are friendly to the point of being a royal headache. And there was this little female calf that just became extremely fond of our cameraman and did not want to leave him alone. And she was wanting to snuggle with him. And it was like worming her way up like a reclining princess against his chest and putting her head on his arm above the camera and putting her flipper on his cheek. It's just so anyway,
so you got what you needed.
There's also massive, it turns, like sturgeon in our rivers.
Oh yeah,
like we went and
we've got big sturgeon here.
We got in the water with a famous one named Herman. And Herman the sturgeon,
is he at the Dorshak area? Is that where he is?
He's near Bonneville in Oregon.
Is he radio tagged? How do you know?
No, actually, so with Herman was an Oregon legend. And then they started caring for him, and they took him to 50 state fairs. He appeared at 50 Oregon state fairs, and he became a little too famous. Yeah. And so various drunk rednecks attempted to kidnap him, fish-nap him, shoot him, stab him. From his tank, where they had him.
Okay.
And so they eventually, in the 80s, after 50 years of this, they were like, what?
How long does this thing live?
Like a very long time.
Okay.
So the sturgeon live.
They get to be real old.
Yeah, they get to be real old and real big. They don't have teeth, so they're just massive, slow-moving dinosaur-looking fish. They are just dinosaurs. So they moved him to a pool near the Bonneville Dam in Oregon, and they just don't let him go make appearances anymore. And so he's got some friends in there.
He must be feeling a little like a has-been.
Yeah, no, I think he's pretty content. They throw old Herman the has-been. So they let us.
Used to be a famous sturgeon.
Yeah.
Now I'm just stuck here.
Yeah, I love the fact that we got to scuba dive with Herman in his pool with his friends.
How big is Herman?
12 feet ish at this point. Plus or minus 11 to 12.
It's pretty huge.
Herman the sturgeon, and they're very bony. Yeah, they've got these ridges and spines like dinosaurs. They really look ancient. And it's super cool. So we had a lot of fun doing this, and now we just have to get the word out. So that's why I'm here.
So you're here to tell us all to do it, and where do they go to sign up?
What I really want is but in my experience, administrators of schools, male administrators of schools especially, kind of tend to keep their eye on the ball. They keep their head down. They do one thing, and it is the moms who can
who can throw a party.
Who can throw a party and who can be the yeast that makes the thing happen. You know, it's like so that's why I wanted to talk to you all, is because we would love for the word to get out to the co-op organizers and to the administrators and to the pastors and the deacons of all your churches to say you can host a showing.
And this
so I still hear from people saying, so how do we know which theaters it's showing in? It's like, well, it's showing in whichever one you want. It can show in classrooms, sanctuaries, swimming pools, wherever you want. So just make sure your groups, your communities and churches and schools and co-ops,
where do they need to go? Just Riot and the Dance?
RiotandTheDance.com.
So that's easy, guys.
Yeah, RiotandTheDance.com.
And it will be fun for everyone to...
I'm
and if
super
you need
excited.
to leave the room during the water beetle scene, just know your kids will love it, and you can go get some snacks. Make sure you get some juice boxes. Get some juice boxes.
A snack is not the thing you're gonna be wishing for at that time. Bring your own emesis bag so that you can be sick while watching.
It is funny though, because doing this, like writing fiction and having this urge to make nature documentaries, they don't really merge. Those two things don't quite overlap.
I think they do.
But the coolest, I do too. But the coolest things I've gotten to do or see in my entire life have all been doing this.
Yeah.
Like chasing animals around with a camera to show children has just been
just the hot stuff.
Way too much fun. Yeah. And I was scuba diving for this right before my brain surgery, and I probably won't ever scuba dive again after. And I am so glad I didn't know.
Yeah.
And that I could do it. That I got to go actually do this stuff and get slapped by a sea turtle and
you did all of that.
And do all these things when the deep was going to be sort of off limits for me again soon. Mm-hmm. So it's been very, very fun. And Uncle Gordon has done a great job. He's very much his folksy self as he guides kids around. So
very fun. I'm super excited.
Well, I should say we talked about our fears of things, but I just feel like this is the time that I want to tell a story, which is that both Becca and I developed a later childhood fear of moths.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it came about because the three of us were being babysat at our aunt and uncle's house by a different aunt and uncle, but it was Gordon and Meredith were babysitting us at Evan and Leslie's house.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was this old house, and we were in the upper floors by some big pine trees. These are not things that I know to be important. They just feel important now.
Yeah.
And it was a really big window, and it was the dog days of summer. And our Aunt Meredith, we were all in sleeping bags on the floor in this upstairs room. And she opened the window because it was so hot in there. And then because we were in a place we didn't know and everything, she turned on a desk light. But then it was glary, so she pointed it at the window, and I think none of us thought at the time of that. What might happen. Open window without a scream.
Yep.
And what happened is that we sort of came awake.
Like 4 a.m.
4 a.m. in the early dawn light. And the entire situation was so mothy that you can't even.
They just had settled on the floor. But
they were still
on the walls.
They were all over the curtains. They were all over our sleeping bags. They were all over the floor.
I remember. I woke up first.
It was a velvet carpet.
I tried to go over to wake you guys up, and I remember trying to walk across the room to wake you up, crunching on
couldn't.
moths.
There was no bare floor
across.
But see, I think that this is actually even. I don't understand that. I've never seen anything like that here. So that was really bizarre that
you should
happened.
Open your window and take out the screen and shine a light outside all night. You'll see it again.
If we can. Well, I remember us getting up for whatever reason. We were in a foreign place and we were not sure what. Somehow we felt that this was probably our fault and we needed to deal with it. Because I remember we set to work like picking moths off of the curtains and throwing them out the window. And they were all like asleep. And it was one of these things where.
Until you picked them off the curtain.
Where it was really gross at the time, but not nearly as.
We tried to sweep them.
Yeah, we did. I remember hunting around in the kitchen, the dead of the night, trying to find a Well, it was early dawn.
We met in the library to talk about what should we do, and then we went and got the broom, and we had a real trial of a time. And then never after that was I quite cool with the moth.
Swept up ourselves a little moth tornado.
I don't remember
for some reason, I'm still fine with moths, and you both.
I actually
a true moth phobia.
I actually came out of my moth phobia with being a mother because I felt like I could not impart this to my children.
I'm still firmly not.
I act really casual about it now, but inside I hate it. No, but on the outside I say, "Hey, just kill it." And then I'm like, "Let me go hide."
The thing is, I had that trauma with moths, and then another moth flew up my nose.
But Becca, you got the moth up your nose because once something knows you hate it, it finds you out. It seeks you out. Yeah. And I one time tried to be brave.
It's called there is a God, and he likes to
but see, Becca one time, so in her room upstairs, she was like, there's a moth in my room and it's spazzing all around. I was like, don't worry.
Asterisk spazzing.
Sorry, asterisk. and I was
not offensive, guys.
I'm gonna overcome this. And I was like, don't worry. I'll handle it. And I'm like, I can rise above. I can kill a moth. Becca doesn't like it, but I will be the one who's reasonable. And I went and got up on a chair to try to get this thing off of the ceiling. And because it knew my heart, knew my fear, it just shoots straight off of the ceiling and lands on my lip. Of like, when does that happen? That does not happen. And I leapt off the chair and I ran down the stairs the whole way going. So in the end, I looked like the fool. I was going to be the brave one, but I did not carry the day. Instead, I was a dork. So, well, Nate, thank you for joining us to tell us about Riot in the Dance. And everybody, you should watch Riot in the Dance. You should be part of this fun time with Uncle Gordon and all these interesting people we happen to have here in town who got scuba certified to go do scary deeds in the water so that they could understand more of our God and the world he made. So join us in watching it. When does it release?
Releases March 6th, but if you order it before February 14th, there's lots of free swag.
Oh, you want the swag.
The coloring books and the adventure books and all the stuff we throw in for free if you order before Valentine's Day.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.